Hello, and welcome to my channel. My name is Laura, and today we're gonna finish up a quilt I was working on. Um, so what we're seeing here is the end of last video, my compilation of all of the 9 patches that I made. Um, my plan is to use these 9 patches as their own squares in a landscape quilt. Um, and I think it's turned out pretty good, but you gotta keep watching to find out. So I do have a drawing where I had drawn out the design on graph paper. So using that design, I tried um, assembling them via the blocks. There's the design. So I'm starting with the center flower. So I'm trying to put basically 4 squares together wherever I can to like put them together rather than strips. And I'm not entirely sure that that was the best way to go about it. Um, Part of the problem was I wasn't sure that I had made enough squares, and because there was like, I needed for the original design something like 400 blocks. Um, I'm showing you here that I am only sewing anything that's not a half square. So I wasn't sure if I had enough of the blue blocks, and I was worried about the blues compared to the dark blues of the raindrops. Um, and so I was trying to put together things that didn't need to be fully laid out in order to see. And that did cause some issues because in the end, putting it together, nothing was a straight seam. You'll see it, I guess, but you'll see that I have all of these wonky little missing squares. And if I had done the half squares at this step here, it would have been a lot easier on myself. However, I needed it to be laid out to see and make sure that nothing was next to each other. So having only a few like actual fabrics to do this probably would have been the best bet, but it is what it is. I was trying to like sew it to the best of my ability to make sure that I was hitting everything in the design that I had. I did wind up changing some of the design elements, but that was the center of the flower. Next, doing the leaves, and these two, because I only used those fabrics, like the 2 fabrics for each of those, I figured that was the best place to start because there was going to be less of a alignment issue. And I think it worked out. Yeah. Sadly, I do not have a dedicated space for sewing, so I have to make do with the space that I have available. Um, and I didn't want to take over the entire living room. But here's the edge of a blocked out piece of the leaf. Um, I do think that it was helpful to sew them in batches. I think that the better option would have been to have the background blue and the leaves be kind of their own colors, like only a limited number of colors that was being used, because I think that that would have allowed me to sew them into larger strips by the end, and that would have made it much easier. But you live and you learn. So if you design something similar and you decide to do something like that, learn from my mistakes, I guess. What I'm doing here is sorting out all of the different yellows and oranges. I had the plan to have it go from orange to yellow in like an ombre effect. However, some of the oranges that I picked were pretty close to yellow, and so I don't think that the end result was exactly what I had originally envisioned, but that doesn't mean that it's ugly. I personally like it. But in order to do that, I needed to make sure, especially since I wanted to make sure that the petals stood out as individual petals, and they were going to be 2 rows or 2 columns of 9 patches. I needed to make sure that that the petals were different colors next to each other in order for them to stand out as individuals. Because if they were all the same 9 patches, like the 3 I have at the top, they would have melded into one petal, basically. So, yeah, that's why I'm sorting it out here, and then I can go through and line them out to make sure that I'm getting both the blend that I kind of wanted and also that they're different next to each other. And I think the petals were probably my favorite part of sewing these together. At a certain point, some of the pieces and like the batches get so large and overwhelming at times. I don't know. But I did enjoy sewing together the petals. I think it was also because I really liked the fabrics that I chose for the petals. I love orange and yellow. They're just such good colors, such good, happy, fiery colors, which is what I wanted for the sunflower. This process was a lot, so I'm going to go ahead and speed it up because I took a lot of time deciding on the colors. I just really wanted to make sure that nothing was lining up next to anything else. And here we have the final panels, and I am selecting the patches that I'm going to use for the half squares that are going to go on the top, or I had originally planned being on the top of this. There were some design changes that are to come. But yeah, so each panel, I left separate until the later assembly just to make sure that I had the design that I wanted and it was all looking good. Here we're doing the clouds. The clouds I think were the most difficult, which is kind of why I started with the other parts. I really was trying to do the same thought process with the petals in that using specifically 2 tones of fabrics for different cloud parts would differentiate the different cloud parts, so like add some depth and shadow. But I discovered that I hadn't gotten enough fabric for it, which I was already kind of worried about, and I was planning on making some adjustments for the clouds. But yeah, basically I didn't have enough fabric, so I had to redesign. And I think that in the final result, in my opinion, the clouds are the weakest aspect of the overall design. But I am not opposed to doing this design again. Probably not anytime soon, but maybe in like 5 years, I'll do a throwback where I remake this quilt and see how much I've learned. Yeah. So subscribe if you want to see that in 5 years. um, that being said, the fabrics that I used for the at least the white parts were some of the prettiest fabrics, and I don't regret having clouds as a part of this motif. I don't, you know, I would make changes if I were to do it again, but I had to make do also with what I had, and it was still working around all of those blues. All of those blues! Yeah, I think that with the clouds, though, if I could have done the half squares and and tried to stick to my making 4 squares and putting them together that way, it would have been a lot easier. I made it incredibly difficult for myself with all of the angles that the clouds are. And that caused a few issues in assembly, which is frustrating, but you know, you live, like I said, I'm going to keep saying it, live and learn, I guess. You know, sometimes you just got to do it. Yeah, and you can see me scratching and drawing. I'm making adjustments as I go, which is, I knew was going to happen. Again, with the amount of fabrics that I was able to get. So. Most of this is just watching me assemble, so I'm gonna let that roll if you want to see me playing around with all these 9 patches. But in the meantime, I have been still trying to read pretty regularly. I have not been able to keep up reading as often because I've been pretty busy. But I have a graphic novel recommendation if any of you are interested in graphic novels. Black Star. It's published by Abrams Comic Arts, and it is basically a sci-fi story in which there's a mission to go off planet to get an ingredient that is needed for some kind of medical cure, but things happen along the way. There's danger, and basically there are only 2, there's an accident, and not everybody survives, and so it winds up dealing with betrayal and a whole bunch of character developments, and you're following a character and you want to be on their side, but it did a really good job of making no one a bad guy necessarily or a good guy. It played in the gray, and I think that's what I really liked the most about it. Was that it neither of the characters were evil or good. They just were making the best decisions that they could with the information and the goals that they had available, which I personally love stories like that. I'm in gathering my thoughts. I think that it was really well done. And on Goodread, I went and looked it up, and like it didn't have very many reviews, so I don't know how many people know about it. I would say that this graphic novel is probably PG-13. It does cover some heavier topics, but yeah, that is Black Star by Eric Anthony Glover and Ariel Jovellanos. I'll put the information down below. I won't provide a link because I don't, I mean, I guess I could, but I don't want to support anyone, you know, retailer necessarily, but add it to your read list, you know? Here we are back with finished part of the cloud. Not totally finished, but still trying to kind of sew in those, in that design pattern that I had laid out. The clouds were hot, they were rough. I would definitely not do this. Don't do it my way. My battery is about to die, so I gotta make this quick. I am out here laying out the bottom of the quilt because I want to make sure that I'm not putting colors together, because I realized when I did this square that I got to be careful with these colors and how they're going to match up. So I gotta lay it all out. I can't do it in little batches, I guess, because I want it to be even. And this one also wants to make a quilt, apparently. So here we are. I'm gonna go charge my battery. Stop it. All right. Check in later. Okay, my battery is charged. And this is what I was working on while it was charging. So I've gotten half of it pretty well laid out. This whole thing is all fully sewn. I'm working on the next few strips, and then I want to iron them and get this at least put together, and then scooch it over so I can lay out the other part. Yeah, I'm excited. These squares are coming along pretty good. I'm really, really happy with the way this is looking so far. And even on camera, like, I'm so happy that you can tell there's a mountain. I mean, at least I think it looks like a mountain. Yeah, I will keep going. So I was able to show kind of how I was sewing them together, the half squares anyway. I was trying to line up the center square regardless of the size. Were I to do this again, I think that I would square things up a little bit better, because I did not do that. And it shows, but that's okay, because I do like the end result, and I don't think that that was so terrible. It did just make the final assembly a little difficult. But the thing that I was trying to explain was that by doing this, they had to be opposite because of how those center squares wound up being. So you had to use a total of 4 blocks to make the half squares, and they had to be opposites in the 9 patches in order to line up properly. Yeah. I do like the way that the half squares and with the 9 patches wound up looking for some of them, but not all of them looked that great. That's okay. And I definitely have some thick corners here, but it is what it is. It is what it is. Oh, I caught myself. I'm only over showing this because I did actually make a mistake and have like a square. I had to take it apart where they were they were the same in the center. Uh, yeah. It looks so nice. And I do cut those threads. Apparently, I predicted my own behavior because I didn't realize that I was going to cut them right now. Looking good. I will say that after this point, it begins to get more and more difficult with the assembly. And it's just mainly because by the end, the lines, the final pieces were not straight. You can see here that like I have corners like that. It made the final assembly so difficult. Don't do that to yourself. Use a smaller selection of fabrics. But I did eventually get it fully put together. The large pieces were really difficult to handle. But yeah, I ultimately, the final design changes, I don't think really affected the overall layout that much. I just cut off the top part because it was getting pretty long, and then rearranged some of that shadow or the cloud. I did have to cut off. So one of my mountains has a flat top, but that's okay. I just didn't want to deal with trying to have 3 colors in one of those raindrop squares. That was like gonna be way too much for me to handle, and I was getting fatigued at this point. Yeah, but overall, I'm so happy with the way that it turned out, and it's clear, the design, and yeah, I'm excited. So if you want to see more of the things that I make, subscribe, like, comment. You know, you probably know all the things to do. Don't do it if you don't want to, though. Only do it if you want to. Okay. It'll probably be a while before I actually get this thing quilted. I think that the seams are probably too much to get it long-armed, so I may wind up hand quilting this one as well. But for now, it's going to go into the back of my closet with the rest of my unfinished projects. So at least I have a finished top. So, all right. I will see you guys in the next video. Thank you so much for watching. And I hope you guys are having a good fall and staying warm. All right. Bye.